Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Facts on Friday. It is December 10th, 2021, and I'm Jesse Zerwell, joined with here with my co-host, Misty Winston. And we've got a full bill of news stories to get through today.
Yes, we do.
Let's get started.
Yeah. So here's the thing, you guys. Today was a really terrible fucking day. So the Assange ruling that was read today in court was basically just they addressing the U.S. appeal. And so the judge ruled in favor of the prosecution, which means that this is getting kicked back to the district courts, which means that Julian Assange is going back to Belmar. She's going to miss yet another Christmas away from his family. And we've just taken like a gigantic leap towards actual extradition. Like this has been something that's been bantered back and forth, but this is like we're really there now. Like the door has been opened to a much wider degree, and so this has been a really it's frustrating. Like I'm trying to find positivity. Like Craig Murray this morning did a great job of saying that, it still opens up the abilities to, continue to fight back. And it still opens up the abilities to address other points that so far have been left out. Like we haven't really had the appeal for the free speech aspect of the case hasn't even been heard yet. So this is all the stuff to do with like the mental health aspect, that it being rejected, extradition being rejected based on the mental health grounds that Vanessa Judge Bracer ruled on January 4th. But it's been like this. Today was a gigantic leap towards real extradition. And furthermore, it means that this dude sits in prison for even longer. He shouldn't be there, you guys. I don't know why I have to keep saying that. I don't know. I don't care how you look at this case. What is happening to him is really fucked up. They spied on him in the Ecuadorian embassy. His conversations with his legal team were spied on. That's a massive violation of his rights. And how are you able to effectively combat that legally when the people you're up against have access to your conversation with your legal team? It's ridiculous. So it doesn't matter what you think of Julian Assange. It doesn't matter what you think of WikiLeaks. We should definitely have the conversation about the fact that WikiLeaks is the most revolutionary journalistic outfit that we have seen in a very long time. And that's, we can all have those conversations too, because Julian Assange is probably one of the best journalists ever. But yeah, today was it, and it sucks because I feel like I'm just, it's a struggle for me today. I know I shouldn't be negative, but it is a struggle for me today. So I'm going to be honest about that. And it sucks. I'm frustrated. I'm very frustrated, honestly.
So let's get into
over.
some of the details of what happened at the hearing. One of the judges didn't show up. What was that all about?
So Burnett didn't show up today, and we should pull that up actually just so that people can see it. So hold on. I cannot type and talk at the same time. Okay, so one of the judges, Lord Burnett, is a good friend of a minister who helped orchestrate Julian's arrest from the Ecuadorian embassy. So let me share my screen. This is a great article from Declassified UK, Matt Kennard and Mark Curtis. So did that come up? I just want to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I always get paranoid. Okay, so Assange judge is a 40-year good friend of minister who orchestrated his arrest. Again, by Matt Kennard, Mark Curtis at Declassified UK. They do great stuff. Actually, Matt Kennard, I should point out, has an amazing, it's less than 5 minutes. I don't know, it's like 4 minutes and 40 some odd seconds. It's a great like explainer video of why you should care about what's happening to Julian Assange and the implications of the case. And it's amazing. It's one of my favorite resources. So I'll put that in the chat in just a minute. But Lord Chief Justice Justice Ian Burnett, the judge that will soon decide Julian Assange's fate, is a close personal friend of Sir Alan Duncan, who, as foreign minister, arranged Assange's eviction from the Ecuadorian embassy. The two have known each other since their student days at Oxford in the 1970s when Duncan, blah, blah, blah. This is just their backstory. Now the most powerful judge in England and Wales, Burnett will soon rule on Assange's extradition case. The founder of WikiLeaks faces life imprisonment. In his recently published diaries, In the Thick of It, Duncan wrote in 2017, my good friend and Oxford contemporary Ian Burnett is announced as the next Lord Chief Justice. So they're good friends, since university days. And so Duncan's diaries also show that as a foreign minister, he spoke privately to Lord Chief Justice Burnett in May 2019, a conversation that was not logged in government records. Essentially, he called him a miserable little worm. So to nobody's surprise, the most powerful judge, or whatever they just called him, most powerful justice in the UK, is corrupt. Shocking. I mean, of course they are. These people should not be making these decisions. Do you know what I'm saying? It's crazy. Lady Arbuthnot had ties to some defense stuff. Like, it's intense, the level of corruption and the cesspool, like the consolidation of power. It's terrible. So yeah, this guy didn't show up today. He didn't bother to show up.
Yeah, I think that was a wise decision on his part. But it also speaks to the fact that these people are calling Assange a miserable little worm because they are terrified of being found out by WikiLeaks, what WikiLeaks has revealed and will almost certainly reveal in the future. These people are corrupt and compromised, and that's why they have such a bloodlust for Assange.
Yes. And it's been this decade-long pursuit of this, I mean, more than a decade. As Stella pointed out, he's now been incarcerated for over 11 years in some form or another. Whether it was the first time he went to prison, or the time when he was on house arrest, or the time that he spent in the Ecuadorian embassy, or, now being in Belmarsh or whatever. He's been detained for more than 11 years. And that's crazy for journalism, you guys. Journalism. That's all he did. That's all he did, was just a journalism. Just a journalism, you guys. Seriously, journalists do that exact same thing. He was just better than everybody else at doing it. And he managed to figure out a way to have mass data dumps be effective. To me, it's really difficult to understand how anybody could not want to know what your government is doing in your name, how they're fucking you over, how they're fucking over the planet, how they're fucking over your kids. And, I want to know that stuff. These are not people. I'm not giving, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't, it's really, I'm super frustrated. Like, I'm very ranty and pissed off. Like, I'm having a hard time, like, not just going off, because I think here's why. We have been trying every possible method of getting people in quote unquote positions of power to do the right thing here. And they're not doing it. And at this point, there's still people who want to be nice, and we're well past that point. If you're an Assange supporter and you think that we should be like just waiting and being nice and, trying to beg people, it's been 2.5 years since he's been in prison. Unacceptable. That's unacceptable. Like, I don't need to be nice about that. That's disgusting. You shouldn't be not speaking out for this human, first of all. I mean, y'all, he's being tortured to death. That's not me. That's Nils Melzer, who's the UN Special Rapporteur on torture. Most people who look at this, and here's the other thing that isn't really getting a lot of talk, but the United States is essentially there are dozens of journalist organizations different around the world who have spoken out against what's happening to Julian Assange, Reporters Without Borders, like a whole shit ton of people, right? So the U.S., by continuing this, is essentially changing the definition of what journalism is. Like, that's what they want. Like this is a step that we're taking, that they decide what is truth. They decide what is allowable information for you to know. I don't want anybody to have that kind of power. I want to be able to know everything, you know?
Right. And to put this in a geopolitical context, right now the US is basically foaming at the mouth for Russia to invade Ukraine, even though Russia has no intention of doing so and has come on record numerous times over the past month to say so and decry what the US and its mandarins in the press are saying um, about Russia's intentions, how they're trying to manufacture a war between Russia and Ukraine, which would essentially be a proxy war for the US. And of course, there is the stain that's been placed on Assange and WikiLeaks, the Russian stain, the Red Scare stain. So this seems totally in line with the US's stance, belligerent stance toward Russia. I think that they still view Assange and WikiLeaks as affiliated with Russia, even though that is absolutely not the case. And so this is their way of punishing him for that. And at the same time, not causing too much of a stir with outright extradition. And Moscow itself, shortly after the ruling came down, came out and condemned it, as did Amnesty International and I
As did a
believe
lot of fucking
a
people.
whole host of other organizations and people. So it's important to remember that a lot of people, regular people like us, but not us in particular, but people who rely specifically on mainstream media for their news, they are very much still under the impression that Assange and WikiLeaks are affiliated with Russia or acting on Russia's behalf or are Russian assets, all of which has been debunked numerous times over. I don't think we need to go into the details there, but I
But here's the
am
thing. Here's what I would say to those people, because Shane brought this up. I was on Fault Lines this morning, and Shane brought this up, and I immediately was like, that doesn't even work for me anymore, because what he is in prison for, I need those people to listen to me. I don't know. There's probably not very many of them who are ever going to see this because I'm not in their bubble, right? But if you guys happen to see this, if you were one of those people, a liberal, a Hillary Clinton supporter, whatever, and you think that Julian Assange got you Donald Trump, that shouldn't matter anymore. Here's the thing. It doesn't have anything to do with what he's in prison for. And what he's in prison for is not okay, and the way that he's being treated is not okay, and you shouldn't want that for anybody. When you start thinking it's acceptable for people you disagree with, it becomes much easier for it to happen to you or people you agree with. So he's a journalist who's being tortured to death for doing journalism, for exposing war crimes, like some of the most heinous. Well, go watch the collateral murder video and then come back and talk to me, because I don't think anybody can watch that video and not be changed. That was murder. And that's like a regular occurrence. That's just a tiny piece. I mean, WikiLeaks is only exposed. If you think that like what WikiLeaks exposed, there's like that in spades. Like that's what happens on a regular fucking basis in these wars. It is a maybe daily occurrence around the globe. So I want to know about that and be able to stop it. And, but that's what he's being held for. It has nothing to do with 2016. It has nothing to do with Russia. But I also really, really, really need those people to stop and take a deep breath and realize that there's absolutely no evidence linking Julian Assange to Russia or Putin. They didn't even interview him. They didn't even interview, like, captive audience, Julian Assange. He's in the Ecuadorian embassy. Everybody knows where he's at, right? They didn't interview him to talk about Russiagate at all. That's curious, don't you think? Considering that everybody was trying to sell you on the fact that Julian Assange got the emails through Russia. Weird, that like Mueller or, what's his fucking face? Jim Comey, and none of them, nobody ever talked to Julian Assange. Nobody ever talked to, that's weird, isn't it? Like, you need to stop. Like, this is ridiculous. This case is ridiculous. It's insane
And
what's happening.
and that myth about the Russian connection still persists. If you remember the Yahoo News story that was published in October, I believe it was, uh, penned in part by diehard Russiagate hoaxer Michael Isikoff. Um, it had to slip in a completely unverified and anonymously sourced story about WikiLeaks planning with Russia to, in Isikoff's words, spirit Assange out of the embassy. I don't know how you can consider yourself a serious journalist if you're using the word spirit as a verb, but so it is. But that myth persists, and Isikoff certainly didn't do any favors injecting that into his story. And if you go back a little ways to Aaron Mate's interview with Michael Isikoff on his show Pushback, Isikoff became very testy at one point and was adamant that we don't lionize Assange. So it seems that Isikoff himself has a vendetta against Assange, probably because Isikoff is such a poor journalist and Assange is
well, Glenn Greenwald says that all the time, that he thinks that a lot of the whole like Beltway journalism, the mainstream media or whatever, that a lot of this is professional jealousy. And that's why they don't stand up for him, because this is, I mean, and it's not just him, it's WikiLeaks as an institution. He just, I think he would agree with that. Like he's had a lot of people helping him throughout the years. He obviously gets the most attention, but he's broken more stories. If you think about it, go look at WikiLeaks, yo. There's a ton of shit in there, and most of it, like, most people don't even know. And what's kind of interesting about WikiLeaks too is stuff that was released 10 years ago. We may not even be able to make connections for like another 10 years, or we may be able to make some connection from a WikiLeaks from years ago, because a lot of this stuff like plays out over time, or you'll start to notice connections, or you'll start to notice patterns of people who hang out together, or whatever it is. Like it's I mean, there's a wealth of information in WikiLeaks. There's a lot of like filler too, because they publish everything, you know what I mean, as long as it's not like a serious risk to somebody's safety, which that's another myth, that they don't do that. They have a rigorous redaction system to make sure that they really do go hardcore. And most of the stuff that's ever been released is, I mean, I think they do, a pretty good job of it. Are they perfect? No, nobody is. But to me, I think it's pretty solid. But yeah, and it's just source documentation. To me, that's what I always go back to, as far as that, because it's source documentation. It's not Michael Isikoff writing an article about something that some source said. You know what I mean? It's source documentation. It is just here. This is in black and white. What was said, what was done, the policy that was written, the conversation that was had, do you know what I mean? The deals that were done, and you get to read it and figure it out for yourself and make up for your own mind. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's an invaluable thing.
And one of Assange's and WikiLeaks's overarching principles is integrity. And I don't think we need to be reminded that integrity is something that most journalists, particularly in the mainstream, who have vendettas, whether voiced or not, against Assange and WikiLeaks, integrity is not their strong suit. So there, in my mind, is almost certainly an aspect of professional jealousy to this. Which,
well, I mean, if you even think about it too, when the Russiagate thing happened, Julian Assange did an interview with, I think it was Sean Hannity. But he straight up asked him, was the source for this Russia? And Assange doesn't really talk about sources ever. But he said, I can tell you for sure it was not a Russia. It was not a state actor, period. And so I'm like, okay. And people are like, you just believe him? Yes, I do. He has this record of accuracy that I think, and I think it means something to him. That means a lot. I don't think he would risk that to come. He doesn't have to speak on it. He never did before. So the fact that he was willing to say anything at all, and then to me, I wouldn't risk if I was him. I know it means something to him. I know that means everything to him. The integrity of WikiLeaks and the fact that they've never had to redact anything that they've ever published ever.
Yeah, and if we want to get into the discussion of state actors as sources for journalists, what about all the American journalists who quote Israeli talking points verbatim? Aren't they receiving their information, their sourcing from state actors?
Yes.
So the hypocrisy just reeks all around.
Well, nobody the journalists in this country have very Julian Assange revealed that they have like very cushy relationships with like political campaigns. You have people like Glenn Thrush who sent an email with an article that he was getting ready to publish to the Hillary Clinton campaign and literally said something like, I realize this makes me a hack, but here, read my article and tell me if there's any changes you want made. That's pretty astonishing. And then there was like lists of journalists who were like going to dinner parties and hanging out with Hillary Clinton staffers, and like it's very intertwined. There is no like actual journalism is supposed to hold powerful people accountable. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not supposed to be like the public relations outfit for your politics. That's crazy. And that's essentially what our media is. It's just the propaganda wing of the establishment,
Yeah, and especially the Beltway press corps, it's become a sort of social class of its own. And you look at reporters like Ryan Grimm, for example, who have this priggishness about them, this imperiousness about them.
I need to pull up his tweet.
That just gives them some sort of mental block from ever admitting that they're wrong or ever delving too deep into what's going on. And I'm always reminded when I think of Ryan Grimm of when our friend Franco from Frank Analysis, whose show you should definitely check out, when he spoke with Ryan Grimm at the Capitol sleepover back in the summer. And Ryan Grimm said to him essentially that his job, Ryan's job, was just to report what's going on in the Capitol. And if that doesn't smack of stenography, I don't know what does. But
well, Ryan Grimm today, you want to hear his tweet earlier today? As we continue to drift toward authoritarianism, historians will see Biden's pursuit of Julian Assange as a major stain on his legacy and a contributor toward that authoritarian drift. First of all, drift towards authoritarianism? Like we're full speed ahead, homie. Like there is no drift. And who gives a flying fuck what historians are going to say about Biden's pursuit? That's what you're worried about, is Biden's legacy?
Yeah, well, I think Ryan Grimm's been wearing his mask too often, and there's not enough oxygen getting to his brain. So
he just makes me mad because I honestly think he could be good. Like he could be at least decent. I think he's a decent investigative reporter, investigative journalist. I mean, the stuff that he did for Tara Reid, I am appreciative of. You know what I mean? I am. But I don't know. I guess he got caught up. I guess it's hard. I don't know. I'm sure the temptation is great to, be liked and be included and not have any adversaries and take the money and, convince yourself that you're doing some good. Like you justify it to yourself. Well, I mean, if it wasn't for me, it would be somebody else who would be worse. And I think that's what goes on. I honestly think that's what goes on. And then they just convince themselves that it's okay because, that's a lot of temptation to be able to make that kind of money and be on TV and be respected and like everybody, like the powers that, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like that's easy to just really never challenge anything on a real level or to be milquetoast about it.
We can look at Max Blumenthal, compare the work he does as a journalist who's based in DC to the work that somebody like Ryan Grimm does. And you see that Max pulls no punches. And what happens because of that? He's constantly attacked and constantly smeared, but he doesn't get it wrong. And he he stands up for himself, even if that means he's going to be a pariah. He stands up for the organization he started, even if that organization, the Gray Zone, is going to be regarded as a pariah. And I don't think a lot of these so-called professional managerial class journalists have the integrity, as we said before, to fight that fight. They don't want to. It's about careerism and
Yeah,
above all else. And
which sucks. But I mean, yeah, we're in a bad way. Like they've really, we should get more. We should like wrap up my Assange ranting and get to like more substantive stuff because we do have stuff to cover. I just needed to get some shit out, fams, and I still didn't even get it all out. Like I'm still, you know,
well, I think the bottom line with what's happening with Assange, what's been happening this whole time, regardless of what you think of him or WikiLeaks, the fundamental issue at play here is justice. And you can't, no matter what your opinion is of Assange and WikiLeaks, look at what's happening and objectively say that justice is being done. It's not being done. So if you genuinely care about justice and the rule of law being carried out properly, then by default you have to stand up for Assange and defend him against the seemingly endless persecution that's being rained down upon him. So it really boils down to justice in the end. And underneath that, of course, falls the freedom of speech issue, freedom of expression, freedom of journalistic expression. It's all tied in.
see, I think the freedom of speech stuff for me comes before the justice stuff because the justice, like the justice aspect of it is impacted by our like the freedom of speech thing. Because that's to me, it's always like kind of the superseding issue is the fact that if that's taken away, then all of the other like the injustices, all of the stuff that they can do to us is much easier for them to do. But yeah, I think it's pretty close though. I think those two things, those two aspects are pretty close. And it's just Ryan Grimm is a good boy for the oligarchs. He loves that oligarchic money. Yeah, and I really do think that that's what a lot of it comes down to. And I'm not saying I'm better than them. I've never been offered that kind of money and that kind of like career protection. And so, I mean, but I would like to think that I would not be wooed by that so easily. But maybe I'm talking out my ass. Who knows? But it does piss me off. It does piss me off that.
Yeah. And just one more point on journalists like Ryan Grimm. It's very easy for them to come out now with a tweet and to inject themselves into the news cycle.
He's been pretty good on Assange. I'll give him that. He's not fantastic. But to me, like nobody covers it enough. Honestly, I don't know if you Consortium News covers it enough. I will say that. They cover it all the time, and I appreciate them so much.
Mm-hmm.
And they do like deep dives. But yeah, so I would say maybe they would, but most people, if you don't cover it a lot, I get, and that's, maybe irrational, but I don't care.
Well, to wrap on Assange, where do you think it's going from here? Because his legal team has the right to appeal on this, and there are different takes on what may happen. Glenn Greenwald seems to think that this may be just one more step in dragging out the process endlessly.
Yeah. So I think that they want to drag it out. I don't think that the extradition, I think, is something that would be very difficult to sell quiet. You know what I mean? Like, I think that would probably cause a lot of attention. So honestly, I've always said that I think that they're just going to try to kick this down the road as much as they possibly can. And that's what they've been doing so far. They, it's like months and months and months in between court proceedings and decisions and all of that stuff. Like this has been like a constant state of waiting, like this whole adventure. And we have the Stratfor leaks where they were discussing how they were going to handle Julian Assange. one of the things that they came up with is we're going to tie him up in legal stuff for the next 25 years. And I mean, they just took that one step further and just threw him in prison. But this is legal stuff, and this is what they said that they were going to do. So I think that I don't, they're killing him. That's essentially what's happening. They're torturing him to death. He's not been in good health for a long time. His mental health has been deteriorating rapidly. He is being tortured to death, and has been getting tortured. I guess if you're being tortured, it's being tortured to death. Just depends on when they stop and if but yeah, he's for over a decade. The psychological aspect of this is brutal. What they've put him through, the propaganda campaign that's been leveled against him. So, I mean, I guess this is my long-winded way of saying that I think that they're going to try to drag this out for a while.
Yeah.
They could do it for years. We'll see, though. I mean, I never really, honestly, Jesse, it is impossible to make fucking predictions in this case. It really is, because nothing makes sense. Nothing's based on logic or reason. It's the most nonsensical thing I've ever seen. Again, anybody who is objectively looking at the facts of what's happening with Julian Assange is garbage. It is garbage. They have absolutely no case. And whatever little tiny semblance of a case that they had blew the fuck up over the past 6 to 8 months or so. There's the Siggy Thordarson thing, who was the Icelandic guy who is a convicted pedophile and career criminal. He came out and admitted that his testimony was very instrumental in getting the superseding indictment against Julian Assange. And so he admitted that all of that was bullshit. So that happened. And then you had the Michael Isikoff story where the CIA is, plotting to, shoot out tires in the middle of London or get into shootouts in the middle of London and shoot out airplane tires of Russian planes that are going to be spiriting away Julian Assange,
Yeah. Well, one thing we can say for sure is that this ruling really shows the cynicism of what we're supposed to be celebrating as International Human Rights Day today, World Press Freedom Day, which I believe was yesterday.
Oh, I should pull up my tweet because it is. Yeah. So the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded today. And then it was, oh, come on. Please go make a shit ton of noise though, y'all. I have tweeted a lot today, you guys. Oh, and I've made a shit ton of phone calls. I've sent some emails. Oh, there it is. Happy International Human Rights Day.
Well done.
I love that picture.
Yeah.
And I also tweeted the time that we planted the WikiLeaks flag outside the DOJ. That was a good day. We can win this, you guys. We can. It's going to be really fucking hard, but it is going to take mass public pressure, and it's going to mean that we have to make it politically untenable for them to continue this case. I don't know if we can win, but I really think that we should be trying.
And we have to remember. We have to remember, too, that the way the DOJ is trying to run this out and exhaust Assange's legal defense, they're also doing that to exhaust people like us who stand in solidarity with Assange. They want us to give up that solidarity. They want us to think that
just forget.
Futile. Yeah,
walk away.
Just forget and memory hole it. But as long as we, at the very least, keep speaking out, we keep it alive, we keep it in the news cycle, we keep it in people's minds, and we have to keep doing that.
Yes. Do you realize how, like, seriously, people think, how crazy is it that Julian Assange, like, okay, so Barack Obama refused to prosecute Julian Assange because he knew that the threat to the First Amendment, or at least this is his public reasoning for doing it or for not doing it, was that he thought that the threat to the First Amendment was like it was not okay. That was a slippery slope to go down, and he didn't want to do that, right? And so Joe Biden was his vice president, and not a single fucking reporter. No, maybe there has been a couple. I don't know if they've asked a specific question though. Barack Obama didn't want to do it. Why are you continuing this? And this is Trump's the one that had him arrested. And it stinks. Like, this is all bullshit. This is all a bipartisan effort to establish control over the narrative, complete control over the narrative. They almost already have that now. All of our information is very controlled. I mean, that's just real talk. What is it? 5 to 6 companies control 90% of the media, and that's like an old number. I'm sure it's consolidated even further now. But they're essentially saying that the United States will now have the ability to go anywhere, anytime, and arrest anyone, regardless of what country you live in. Julian Assange is not American. He's never been American. WikiLeaks is not an American company. And so we think that we have the right to go and charge another country's citizen under our laws, of which they have no allegiance to. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a very dangerous thing. This is a huge power grab. And I don't want them to be able to control the narrative. That's what this is all about. They want to control the narrative.
Right. And they want to, as we're seeing very clearly, they want to criminalize any kind of dissent. That's what the Biden administration's program about for domestic violent extremists is all about. And it builds off of what's happening to Julian Assange, what WikiLeaks has revealed. Now they're trying to not just criminalize dissenting journalism, but dissenting citizens. And they're going after parents who speak up at school board meetings. They are prosecuting parents whose kids carry out mass shootings, and a whole host of other similar forms of persecution against private citizens. And that's another big reason to stay focused on what's happening to Assange and speak out, because if it can come for him, somebody who's in the spotlight, so to speak, it can certainly come for people like us who are not in the spotlight, who can be disappeared much.
It already is coming for like, we see it all the time in our court systems. But that's, Jesse, don't worry, that's what Ryan Graham would just call a drift towards authoritarianism. That is no drift. That's authoritarianism. We're there. We are there. We've been there for a long ass time. Snowden, come on. Really? That should have been your tip off right there. The Snowden releases. They're every phone call, every text message, every email, like, they got it all, dude. You have no privacy. Zero, zip, zilch, none, nada. And that's fucked up.
Yeah.
That's fucked up.
And it goes to why we can't speak about certain things on YouTube without having that content disappeared forever based on guidelines that we don't ever have access to, or any details or insight into. And again, the point being that it is there's a top-down effect, so to speak. So if it can happen to Assange and an organization like WikiLeaks, it can very easily happen to individuals who have the temerity to speak out. But we shouldn't let that stop us at all.
No. We need to be louder.
So I like that comment by Phenomenal Mysticism. Maybe the UK prison should free Julian Assange and instead put Ghislaine Maxwell.
Something else that's getting no coverage, you guys. That's weird, isn't it? That's weird. Really? This is a massive story. This is a child sex trafficking ring being run at like the highest levels of power.
Right. With heavy CIA involvement,
Yeah.
which it's no coincidence that the CIA recruited a pedophile to lie about Assange. The CIA is one of the, if not the biggest, sex trafficking cartels in the world, going back decades, almost to the inception of the CIA, and even before that, perhaps when it was the Skull and Bones Society. So it's par for the course for the CIA here. But we have to keep speaking out about this. Even if it's not your main issue, so to speak, or what you're focused on, that's fine. But
We just need some noise, please. It doesn't take much.
If you agree that something's wrong, and I think a lot of you out there do, then speak up and support Assange and WikiLeaks however you can.
Yes.
So, and you'll see below there's the phone number for the Department of Justice comment line.
I also have the Capitol switchboard number. I got distracted. I was trying to make banners. I need to go get copy paste. You can call the White House. Who else am I forgetting? DOJ, Capitol, White House. I'll put together a list, because here's the thing. I get a lot of shit because I'm mean. Oh, you're so mean. Why aren't you nice to Bernie Sanders when you ask him to speak for Julian Assange? I tried that, fuckers. I did. I tried being nice. I really, really did. I've made a shit ton of phone calls to people, left messages with interns and on voicemails and all kinds of stuff, asking them to speak for Julian Assange. We tweeted at them. Glory Jones and I have done tweet storms. We were nice for a while. We're 2.5 fucking years into him being in Belmarsh. Anybody who is telling you that you have to do activism anyway, like, you don't get to be gatekeeper of activism, but to like pretend like we have to be nice to these politicians at this point, no, that's not the fucking point. We're supposed to make demands of them, and the only way you can do that is to try to impact them financially, or which is really getting them reelected. So you have to make it a currently, if you make it an election issue, I can't wait to actively and loudly campaign against these politicians on the basis of the fact that they don't speak for Assange. I'm coming for you. Be mad about it. Be mad about it. I'm going to call you out. That's how we have to do this. You don't get this. They're not going to really, you think if you're like, oh, please, will you please speak for Julian Assange? Fuck off. I shouldn't have to beg. This should have been a no-brainer issue. This is a no-brainer issue for anybody who pretends to be for the people, for the left, for whatever, anybody. This is a huge fucking issue. This is the future of press freedom, the future of the First Amendment. They all pretend to claim or pretend to care about press freedom and free speech and all of this stuff. When it comes down to getting a vote, then where are you? They want to talk about how Russia is so terrible to their journalists, or Azerbaijan so terrible to their journalists, or what the fuck ever. They're always really. Anthony Blinken was just on again talking about how important press freedom is. You're torturing Julian Assange right now. The hypocrisy in that is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So no, I'm not going to be nice. Anybody telling you have to be nice, nope, you don't listen to them. We need to start naming and shaming them. That's what Kit Clarenberg said earlier today. He tweeted out that we need to start naming, and I've long been doing that. We're well past that point. He's going to die. They're killing him. I'm not going to beg. If you want to do that, do you. But I'm not going to beg people to speak on this. I shouldn't have to. I'm going to do my best to call you out and keep you from getting elected, or whatever I can do. Because that's not, I'm just so tired of that argument. I really am, y'all. Anyways, we should stop me ranting. We do have a lot of other stuff to cover. But I really just needed to get that out. This is kind of the first time I've been able to kind of just think it out and talk it out. And yeah, we have a vigil tonight, so I'll have even more to say then, I'm sure. But if you haven't gotten involved, please do. in some way, whether it's making a phone call, numbers are down there, or sending an email a day, or however you can get involved. Like really, we need all hands on deck. And I'll say it again. I said it on Fault Lines this morning. Everybody is welcome. Everybody. I'm not going to ask anybody to not advocate for Julian Assange. I'm not going to do it. So
Right.
I don't care who you are, who you voted for, what party you're affiliated with. I don't care. Welcome.
Yeah. And the whole time Assange has been persecuted, it's been made into a partisan issue. It's not a partisan issue. It transcends partisan lines, and it doesn't matter, therefore, if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green Party,
He's
whatever,
exposed them all. So,
whichever you align yourself with, that doesn't matter. It's about very fundamental freedoms, as we previously talked about here. So you can put aside all of
it's the fight
the
against
partisan nonsense
imperialism. Yeah. If you
about
care about imperialism, if you care about the victims of war, if you care about countries like Syria or Palestine or that's what WikiLeaks does. They expose the empire. Nobody's done more to expose the crimes of empire than Julian Assange. So if there's a lot of people running around claiming that they care about the war, ending war, who don't speak for Julian Assange, and it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. It really does impact everything. So it's not even just that. It's, a multitude of issues that I just don't know why people can't see how this is going to impact all of us in a really bad way.
Yeah. If you remember one word related to all of this, it's precedent. And once that precedent is set, it's not going to be turned around, at least not easily. So we've been treading down a very dangerous path here.
We're drifting
for both news organizations and individual citizens. Yeah, you can think we're drifting if you live in the Elysian bubble of the Beltway Press Corps, but we're not. We're hurtling, and it's up to us to stop that race.
It's been an authoritarian country for a long ass time, especially for people of color. I mean, we're just now starting to see a lot of the stuff that it's going to get so much worse. That's what bothers me, is that this is going to get so much worse, and it doesn't necessarily have to. I mean, it's going to get bad, but it doesn't have to we could mitigate some of it.
Yeah. And it's not just about the crimes of empire. It's about the crimes of big tech, big pharma.
We mentioned
this last show. If Assange were free and WikiLeaks were functioning at full capacity,
imagine what we would know.
We probably wouldn't have to wait 55 years for all of Pfizer's clinical trial documents to come out.
Maybe we'd have Medicare for all, because we would have been able to expose the lobbying of pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies. And I mean, seriously, think about it. What would we know? I'm of the opinion that we need like 1,000 WikiLeaks across the globe doing what they do for different countries around the globe. Like, people in power, if we're going to have positions of power, those people in power should have zero privacy whatsoever, full transparency about what's going down. And that's not what we have. We should have full privacy. They should not. And that's flip-flopped right now. So yeah, I'm not.
So I think to seg from there into the whopping defense bill that was passed on Tuesday by the House,
it's seriously long. I'll drop the link in the chat so that you guys have it. And it is really long. We haven't had a chance to look through all of it. We should disclaimer that, because it is really long. I've been very preoccupied, so I've glanced at it. Jesse's read a little bit more than I have, but we're going to just dig into some of it, because this is very relevant to Julian Assange, in fact, as well, because, this is, I keep hitting. Okay. So this is what Julian Assange exposes, really, is this kind of corruption in the military industrial complex. So yeah, what do you want me to?
So if you can pull up the text of the bill itself, and I'll just point out some interesting points, if you will. Some things that remain the same and some things that have been added that we should be very wary of. But
Did it come up?
this is a yes, it did.
Okay.
This is a $768 billion National Defense Authorization Act.
Can we stop for 1
Um,
second? 768 billion. Jen Psaki just went on national TV and told you that how dare you, we're going to actually send COVID tests to everybody. Like, what do you think this is? And $768 billion, more than Biden asked for, is just getting shoveled out. There's no question. Nobody questioned that. There was no like hand wringing. There was no committee meetings or like, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay for this? Seriously, this is a thing that we're all okay with. This is another thing that frustrates me.
yeah, and all you Democrats out there, remember that the House is controlled by the Democrats, so they voted for this. So I think one of the new additions to this, it seems, that's worth pointing out is right there. If you go up a little bit to right there, you'll see under Section 2, subheading A, which is divisions, it says this act is organized into 7 divisions as follows. And if you look at number 7, which is Division G, it's global pandemic prevention and biosecurity. So what that's essentially telling us is that the fear of pandemics, whether real or invented, is never going away. And it's going to be folded into biosecurity to combat these supposed pandemics. And so we should get used to both pandemics and a biosecurity state that's going to be ostensibly combating them, but really is going to be combating us. And you would think that pandemic prevention and arguably even biosecurity would fall under the auspices. There we go. Of a third time's the charm of a health agency, but no, here it is under the purview of so-called defense, and that just points to the fact
this is the new war. This is the new forever war.
Right, and the open secret or not so secret that the military from the very beginning of the so-called COVID-19 pandemic has been heavily involved in regulating and manufacturing what's going on. Moderna has had a long-standing partnership with DARPA, along with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and a host of other globalist entities that have been wreaking havoc, especially on developing nations for decades now. So this is a division, this global pandemic prevention and biosecurity, that we really need to be wary of and pay attention to, because it's another manifestation of the new normal that's being injected into our lives. This time, not under the guise of health, but defense, which should tell you that none of this is or has ever been about health. It's about something larger. It is about a globalist agenda that the U.S. At the nation state level is more than happy to play along with and do its part to help realize. So there is.
If it was about health, you would have healthcare.
Very true. So definitely keep an eye on that. We'll link to this text. It's very long and it's full of lots of nuggets.
Was there any other?
Yeah. So if you can do a Control F search and search for the number 1229, it's section 1229.
Oh, okay.
And I think you're going to have to go down a little bit through the 1229s that pop
These ones are
up.
highlighted. Is this what you wanted?
Well, this is under the contents So there's this sense of
Oh,
Congress
okay.
regarding Israel, but if you go down farther to the actual section of 1229 and what that text says, um, it's basically reaffirming what we've known for a long time, but it's still um,
I don't know where would that
it's
be? Down way farther?
it should come up if you
I did
do
a
a Control
search.
F search.
That's what comes up as these highlighted ones.
So let me look at it on my end.
I mean, is it just like really far down at the bottom? I can scroll that far. I just didn't want to hurt everybody's eyes.
Yeah, it's far down at the bottom.
Okay, hold on. I'll stop sharing and then I'll scroll down and get it and then I'll come back. Holy balls, there's so much, dude. Wow.
So it's 11 of 16. I don't know if that number comes up when
Oh, okay.
you
Yeah, hold
Control F
on.
search.
Whoops. Wrong button. Okay, here we go. I'll share it again. Too many tabs open. I think it's this one. Okay.
Yep. So here you see under section 1229A, section 1229. Oh, I think you have to go up a tiny bit. There we
Oh,
go.
okay.
Section 1229, sense of Congress regarding Israel. It is the sense of Congress that, one, since 1948, Israel has been one of the strongest friends and allies of the United States. Two, Israel is a stable, democratic country in a region often marred by turmoil. Three, it is essential to the strategic interest of the United States to continue to offer full security assistance and related support to Israel. And four, such assistance and support is especially vital as Israel confronts a number of potential challenges at the present time, including continuing threats from Iran. So here we see something that's been beat into our heads year after year with the inevitable passing of this act, which actually has been consecutively approved for 60 years running now, always with this gesture of benevolence toward Israel.
Yes.
So,
not just benevolence, like complete, I don't even know. Y'all, I mean, it literally says it is essential to offer full security assistance and related support to Israel. I mean, come on, y'all. Why? Why does nobody ever question why? Why do we owe them like our undying allegiance? That's weird.
right. And then you can see from there it flows nicely into the existential threat that's coming to us any day now from Iran. Sense of Congress on enrichment of uranium by Iran. It is the sense of Congress that, one, the government of Iran's decision to enrich uranium, which is legal, up to 60% purity is a further escalation and shortens the breakout time to produce enough highly enriched uranium to develop a nuclear weapon. And two, the government of Iran should immediately abandon any pursuit of a nuclear weapon. So we go from our undying fealty to Israel, which is a nuclear power that has never fully disclosed the extent of its nuclear arsenal, to telling Iran that they can't even enrich uranium for non-nuclear weapon purposes.
If I were Iran, I would absolutely make a nuclear weapon because that's the only way that you can avoid, uh, being overthrown if you don't go along. You know what I'm like? How many times do we have to see? I mean, do you want to be Gaddafi?
And whatever you think of Ayatollah Khomeini, he swore off nuclear weaponry until the Iraq-Iran war from 1980 until 1988, during which Iraq used chemical weapons on the battlefield supplied by the U.S. and other Western powers. And that was something that woke Khomeini up. In a sense, with regard to the deterrent capacity of nuclear weapons. But Iran maintains that it's not developing nuclear weapons.
I wouldn't
But
blame them if they did, though. I'm just saying.
right, whether we should take them at their word or not is another discussion. But if you put it in the context of Iran being staring down the barrel of both American and Israeli guns, um, it would make sense for them to develop deterrent capacity, just as North Korea has. And so,
Can we go
again,
back a second before we go? Are you? Because we missed number 2 of the first part. Israel is a stable democratic country in a region often marred by turmoil. What the fuck kind of propaganda bullshit is that? Are you
yeah,
joking? Family, listen to me. They are committing genocide. Like that's a thing that's happening. That's a thing that's happening. They are not. That's not stable by my definition. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's not
right.
stable.
And if you want to put the genocide Israel has been committing against Palestinians for well over 70 years now, if you want to take that out of the picture, which we shouldn't, but for the sake of argument here, let's take that out of the picture. Um, Israel is still not a stable democratic country. If we look at what it's doing with the rollout of Pfizer's injections, Pfizer went directly to Israel first, directly to Netanyahu when he was still prime minister, and said, I want Israel to be the test case for this injection. Netanyahu was happy to
Be
abide
bought off.
abide by that, especially since Israel is a surveillance state par excellence. So they would be able to track how these injections affect the population. And what we're seeing there now is essentially Israel, the Israeli government, with its rollout of these injections and now endless boosters, committing genocide against its own people. So it really gives the lie to the stable democracy skullduggery that is being put forth here. And one other thing I want to point out, if you can do a search for Syria, in case you thought that that dirty war was over, it's not, because there's a provision in here. Uh, let's see.
Do I need to go up a little bit so you can get context or?
So, well, right here, this is worth pointing out. This is subsection B, an assessment of the impact of the Iraq and Syria Genocide Relief and Accountability Act of 2018, Public Law 115-300, on return rates of vulnerable indigenous ethno-religious groups, including Assyrians and Yazidis, in those areas of the Nineveh Plains region in which funds have been spent. So this here reeks of more hypocrisy. The Yazidis, if you'll remember, they were basically being genocided by ISIS, now the Islamic State. And that, as we found out through WikiLeaks emails, WikiLeaks email leaks, the DNC leaks in particular, the Hillary Clinton server leaks, we found out through them that the U.S. was in cahoots, if you will, with ISIS, arming and funding them, helping transport them out of the country to safety in some cases, all while ISIS was genociding ethnic groups like the Yazidis. So this really smacks of hypocrisy as well when it comes to U.S. imperialism and trying to dress it up as benevolence or R2P, the right to protect. And elsewhere in the document, Syria is mentioned in terms of the U.S. offering continued support for vetted Syrian opposition groups. I think we can read between the lines there and conclude that that's continued support for groups that want to take down the government of Bashar al-Assad. And much of the same is continuing, even though we're told, at least by the mainstream press, that the situation is simmering there. It's not. The U.S. is still illegally occupying Syria, as we discussed last week. More crimes of American empire are coming to light, as we also discussed last week. And hopefully, this week on the show, on our interview series, we'll have Vanessa Beeley on to discuss more of this in detail. So getting away from the minutia here, which I shouldn't say it's minutia, it's a lot of important details, but it's a very long bill, and it's hard to believe that anybody in Congress read this all the way through. It's
No.
it's hundreds of pages, a lot of fine print, but well worth taking the time to look at, because it shows continuity, if nothing else, from administration to administration. So those out there who think that things are being done any differently under Trump, under Biden, when compared to Trump, this really demonstrates that
It doesn't
that's
matter
not the
who's
case,
president.
right? It doesn't matter who's president.
It doesn't matter.
The imperial machine grinds on. Regime change is still very much in vogue in DC, and this is really proof of it. But I wanted to get to some interesting addendums, if you will, to this bill. The first one being, if you can pull up that Hill article from yesterday.
Are you done? Are we done with the
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
want to go through too much of it.
So
I'd
you
like to
want
leave
the
it to viewers.
Hill? Okay, gotcha. I think I got the right one. I think. All right,
Yeah,
let me
so
see.
this is both interesting and bizarre.
Oh, okay. Yeah, UFO one. Gotcha.
Yeah. So defense bill creates new office to study UFOs, and I'll read through this piece because it's short, but it's
Ugh.
as I said, it's curious and bizarre. So the final version of the annual defense policy bill will create a new office to study UFOs, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat from New York, announced on Thursday. An amendment introduced by Gillibrand and co-sponsored by a bipartisan group of senators that will be included in the defense policy bill will replace the existing Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force and create an office administered both by the Defense Secretary and Director of National Intelligence, two very trustworthy positions. The office will be tasked with studying and responding to UFOs, or unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, as referred to by the senators. The office would have access to information regarding UFOs from the intelligence community and Defense Department so that it could help provide a, quote, coordinated, unquote, response to these sightings, according to a release from Gillibrand's office. It would also delve into health impacts and possible national security concerns related to UFOs. Not sure what they're referring to there with health impacts, but that's something to pay attention to. Definitely had my eyebrows raised when I first read that. Additionally, the office would be required to provide an annual unclassified report on its activity to Congress, as well as biannual briefings to lawmakers that would be classified. Among the amendment's co-sponsors are, and this is a pretty motley crew, Senators Roy Blunt, a Republican from Missouri, Lindsey Graham, a Republican from South Carolina, Marco Rubio, Republican from Florida, and Martin Heinrich, a Democrat from New Mexico. Roswell, anybody? Gillibrand said she also worked with Representative Ruben Gallego, who's a Democrat from Arizona. If you can scroll down a little bit.
Sorry, my kid's texting me.
It's okay. On the inclusion of the amendment in the defense policy bill. Quote, our national security efforts rely on aerial supremacy, and these phenomena present a challenge to our dominance over the air, Staying ahead of UAP sightings is critical to keep our strategic edge and keeping our nation safe, unquote, Gillibrand said in a statement. Quote, the United States needs a coordinated effort to take control and understand whether these aerial phenomena belong to a foreign government or something else
How
altogether,
long for it's
unquote, she
Russia?
added. The announcement comes as the annual defense policy bill awaits a vote in the Senate after being passed by the House on Tuesday. A report released in June by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence prompted interest in studying UFOs, as it detailed that 144 UFOs had been detected by the US government since 2004, which seems like a very low number. And nearly all of the cases were still unexplained, which also seems dubious. The possibility of life outside of Earth was not mentioned in the report, but that possibility was also not ruled out in it. So, strange addendum there, something definitely to keep an eye on. I'd like to know what the potential health impacts of UFOs are.
Yeah,
Um,
that seems
but
very.
the fact that that's tucked away in there and something that our taxpayer money is going to be spent on should raise our antennas. Um, I think there is value in understanding what's happening with regard to unexplained aerial phenomena, but here you can see that it's dressed up as supremacy over space, which is indeed the new frontier in militarism. So again, something we should keep on our radars, and we'll definitely provide updates on this as we learn more. And so, one other interesting addendum, if you can bring up that Fox News piece.
Oh, it's so many. You have to do so much just to share an article.
So while Misty's
Oh, there
bringing
it
that
is.
up, I'll add to that there is a section of the bill that calls for the Biden administration to be held accountable with regard to the so-called withdrawal from Afghanistan. Um, I think that that is just virtue signaling,
Yes.
as we can deduce from the way that the so-called withdrawal was carried out. But here we see that Joni Ernst, who is a Republican, is pushing for a global war on terrorism memorial on the National Mall in the defense bill. Um, so the subheader of that, an estimated 7,000 US service members have died in post 9/11 war operations. And this one I'll read through too because it's also short, but very curious development. The latest version of Congress's annual defense bill released Tuesday includes legislation from Senator Joni Ernst, who's a Republican from Iowa, to build a global war on terrorism memorial on the National Mall. Ernst, who served in Kuwait and Iraq in 2003 with the Iowa National Guard, has been working to get a memorial built on the mall since she sponsored the Senate version of the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Location Act in 2020. Quote, I was proud to help successfully secure my bipartisan effort to build a hashtag GWOT or GWOT memorial on the National Mall in the hashtag NDAA, unquote, Ernst said in a Tuesday tweet. Quote, now is the time to honor those who fought and died in the global war on terrorism for their sacrifice. Let's get it across the finish line, unquote. So if you can go down a little bit, there's the tweet they mentioned. And the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Location Act was first introduced in November 2019, but stalled until this year when President Biden ordered the full withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan before September 1, ending the country's longest war. Representatives Jason Crow, a Democrat from Colorado, and Mike Gallagher, a Republican from Wisconsin, passed the House version of the bill on September 23. Gold Star family members are now calling on the Senate to pass its version of the bill in the NDAA. So if you can just pause on that photo right there, the caption says hundreds of people gather near a U.S. Air Force C-17 transport plane at a perimeter at the international airport in Kabul, Afghanistan on Monday. So that was taken on this past Monday. As you can see, the hell that the U.S. has created there is far from over. People are still trying to get out. Many have been left behind who were promised they would be able to get out.
We destroyed
And
their country. This is what we do.
yep. And continuing on, quote, we call on the U.S. Senate to do their part so the memorial can be built in the central part of the mall, unquote, Wounded Warrior Project CEO, retired Lieutenant General Mike Linnington said in a November 5 statement, quote, future generations should be able to learn about the global war on terrorism and honor the sacrifices of those who served, fought, were injured, or were killed in America's longest war, unquote. But passing the bill is only the first step in building the memorial. Congress may face more hurdles in constructing such a memorial on the mall due to a 1986 law. So if you keep going down. On June 23, Michael Caldwell of the Interior Department's National Park Service issued a statement to Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources ranking member Senator Steve Daines, a Republican from Montana, saying that while the department supports the construction of a memorial, it does, quote, not support constructing it within the reserve and therefore, unquote, does not support the Senate version of the bill. And if you keep going down, so the act that's referenced above is the Commemorative Works Act of 1986, which, quote, identifies the reserve as the Great Cross axis of the mall, which extends from the United States Capitol to the Lincoln Memorial and from the White House to the Thomas Jefferson Memorial, unquote. The act states that, quote, the siting of new commemorative works, unquote, in one of 3 locations within the reserve, Constitution Gardens, the JFK hockey fields, or West Potomac Park, quote, is prohibited, unquote, which could be a roadblock in memorial advocates' efforts to get a location in DC. Gold Star families haven't given up and renewed their push for the memorial after 13 U.S. service members, including 11 Marines, 1 Army soldier, and a Navy corpsman, were killed in an August 26 explosion in Kabul. If you remember, that was blamed on ISIS-K. And then just closing up here, Brown University's Watson Institute estimates that more than 7,000 U.S. service members have died in war operations after the September 11, 2001 terror attacks on the World Trade Center. The Institute estimates that more than 30,000 others have died of suicide after serving in post 9/11 operations. So interesting how the suicide toll is buried there at the very bottom.
Also interesting how we haven't heard about ISIS-K and since this happened. Like, it's like we got to hear about it for a few weeks for their scapegoat, and then I haven't heard anything about ISIS-K. Have you?
Yeah, no, I haven't. Interesting
Weird.
that I
Yeah.
guess they retired. But if you can just go back to that piece real
Oh,
quick, what I
sorry.
found really interesting about it was the comments section, and one comment in particular, which I think really hits to the point here, and that is the third comment down from 3 odd numbers, who says, speaking only for myself and from the experience of my 3 post 9/11 deployments, I don't need it. And the rest of the comments, not necessarily from vets, echo that sentiment. People really see this for what it is. It's virtue signaling. And it's also spending taxpayer money on endless war. That's really what it
Yes.
boils down to. As far as I know, the declared global war on terror hasn't ended. It's still going on. There is no intent for it to end. And so building a memorial to the victims of it, which, by the way, would not include Iraqis and would not include
No.
Afghans. it seems, as pointed out in those comments, to be very much virtue signaling ahead of the 2022 midterms. So just some interesting addendums there that are trying to be shoved into this $768 billion bill, which isn't necessarily isn't directly tied to the Build Back Better plan, but you can rest assured that this is part of building back better.
Yeah, and I think
in the most imperial sense of the phrase.
And I think, again, I know I say this all the time, but it's really frustrating to me that this just we continually this happens. $768 billion being spent on blowing shit up for profit, basically destroying countries, destroying lives, murdering people, dropping bombs on children, occupying sovereign nations. But we're $768 billion to do that, and we can't, like, I live in Ohio. We can't get our roads fixed. Like, there's potholes everywhere.
Yep.
We can't get masks. We can't, like, that. Remember when Joe Biden promised 1 masks into every American? You never got that. You didn't get your $2,000. You can't get anything. We can't get anything for from our government, right? Nothing. It all goes to war and destruction. And now we have the new war on COVID, and that's going to be the new forever war. All of this stuff, follow the money. Who's making the money off of this? It's
right.
The same people. It's
right.
It's a consolidation of power. It's a consolidation of assets. It's a consolidation. I mean, and
it's worth pointing out very much so that the initial total for this bill was $25 billion less, but the Democrats, everybody's friends, were fully on board with adding that extra $25 billion.
Of course they were. It's flipped now. Remember when people used to think the Democrats were the anti-war party? That is completely flipped now. Republicans are more likely to speak out against forever war, not for necessarily the same reasons that I'm speaking out, but I mean, just like fiscally, they usually complain about costs and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's Democrats love war. Democrats love them some war, y'all. They really, really do. Look at what Barack Obama did. I mean, he went about destroying 7. We started with 2, really more, but I mean, just the basic ones, the big ones, right? He started with 2 and ended up with 7 countries that he was fucking up.
Yep.
But daily we're fucking up the globe.
And that goes directly back to the Project for a New American Century document, which talked about 7 countries in 5 years. The 5 years goal was missed, but the 7 countries.
General Wesley Clark did an interview.
Seems to be grinding along, and it's also worth pointing out that the voting tally for this was 363 to 70. So a huge majority of the House voted in favor of this, and there you have it. Another year of record insane spending on the military under the guise of defense.
And national security.
This comes fresh on the heels of COP26, where there wasn't one mention made of the so-called carbon footprint of the U.S. military industrial complex. Abby Martin was the lone journalist to take Nancy Pelosi to task on that. Nancy Pelosi had no answer. And in every green agenda you see being pushed, there is no addressing whatsoever of the military industrial complex. So
zero. That's nuts. Again, what? I guess maybe just a lot of people don't know, but if you really, you're going to take that seriously, that, like the Green New Deal doesn't mention the U.S. military a single time. That's not serious. I don't take that seriously. That's a joke. And again, just chaos and destruction bombs and just a lot of shit that we don't use. There's so much excess and waste in the military industrial complex too. Spending like $500 on a hammer or whatever. Like there's all of it, and it's all going to like contractors and Lockheed Martin and all. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way, you guys. Like we don't have to. That our economy doesn't have to be an economy of death. We don't have to do it that way. We really don't.
Yeah, and if you want to get a clearer picture of what this money is being spent on, you can of course drill down into the bill itself. But another good source for looking at this is just a moment. I just want to make sure I get the
I don't have another link.
defense. No, I didn't include it in the links.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
defensenews.com is actually a very good source for seeing just what kinds of equipment this money is being spent on, and which merchants of death are flourishing from the spending. So I recommend people check out defensenews.com. It gives you a pretty honest assessment of the military industrial complex and where the massive amounts of money go.
Yeah.
So there we have it. As I said, another year of record military industrial complex spending. We're going to create memorials for unending war, and we are going to double down on our defense against UFOs. So sleep well tonight.
Yeah. Don't you guys feel safer? I feel safer.
And I think from there, since we're on the foreign policy tip, we can transition briefly into the trial of one Ghislaine Maxwell, which is still taking place in New York City. Chris Hedges just published an excellent piece at sheerpost.com. So Misty, do you want to discuss that a little bit? And
yeah, so again, we briefly touched on the Maxwell trial last week. We said that we wanted to really kind of try to dig into it some more. But honestly, Jesse and I were talking about this before we went live. There is so much. It's really difficult to even figure out how to talk about it, where to start. It is just really like a lot. It's a lot. But again, not getting any coverage. It's really funny. Huge tip of the hat to Olivia Rondeau. I think that's how you say her last name. I'm so bad at names. But she was a guest on Fox News, and they wanted to talk to her about Jussie Smollett. And she flipped the script and brought up the fact that all that case is getting like a really weird amount of attention, and the Ghislaine Maxwell trial is getting none, really, no mainstream media coverage whatsoever. So as always, Chris Hedges is fantastic, and he was also at a protest outside the court, I think on the first day, and gave a speech, and like no fucks, name names, like really went in, right? So which shout out to him, because it's a difficult, I don't know why more people aren't coming out about this. This is a story. I mean, we were talking about earlier about how it's weird that this is getting no coverage, because y'all, this is a story. This has got sex, drugs, politics, power, suspicious deaths. It's a story. And so it's weird that mainstream media is not covering it at all. So, I mean, as you can see,
I think,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the fact that the fix is in. And I want to point people to Addy Ads.
Yes.
You can find him on Twitter. Yeah, he's on the ground, as is Kristan T. Harris. They're both on the ground covering this trial, providing not just daily updates, but almost by the hour updates on their Twitter feeds.
And it's a lot.
And in interviews. Yeah. And they're really drilling down, really getting into the details.
They're directly confronting family members of Ghislaine Maxwell and asking them about,
Addy Ads he confronted Vicky Ward, who poses as a journalist, who's critical of Epstein and Maxwell, but really seems to have a conflict of interest in that she's essentially a friend of Maxwell's. So he confronted her outside the courthouse and asked her very serious and necessary questions that she should be asked. And she threatened to sue both him and anybody who published the suggestion that she and Ghislaine Maxwell are friends. Um, but I think one way we can look at this right now is kind of pulling back and taking a big picture look at what's happening as far as the fix being in. Um, the prosecution, from the reports I've been reading, is really performing quite weakly, as in not having a strong performance, and uh, we should of course, bring up the fact that James Comey's daughter is the lead prosecutor in this case. James Comey of FBI fame, who was all the rage during the Trump era. Um, no conflict of interest there. And also, what is quite curious is that this week it was mentioned that the trial may be wrapped up within the next week. So we're talking about the trial.
This is a huge case.
We're talking about the trial of somebody who, let's say this first, she is not a victim. There's a
No.
lot of press that's trying to paint her as a victim of Epstein. She was not a victim. She, as Jason Burmis has been emphatic about in his reporting, she is a co-conspirator. She is just as guilty as Epstein was in trafficking and sexually abusing
Young
a
girls.
plethora of young girls.
Yes.
Um,
They ran a sex trafficking ring, fam.
and
Period.
and there's almost no doubt, even though it hasn't been explicitly stated, there's almost no doubt that both she and Epstein have ties to intelligence, both the CIA and the Israeli Mossad. Ghislaine's father, if you'll remember, was actually a triple agent for the UK, Israel, and Russia before he ended up floating dead, doing the dead man's float off his boat, which was named Lady Ghislaine, I believe. So all that to circle back to the fact that I think it's a fact that the fix is in here.
Oh, for sure.
This is a show trial. I don't know if that means Ghislaine is going to walk or get some sort of softball sentence, but there's just too much on the table here to come out that would just destroy the careers of many very high level people. You see some of them listed there at the beginning of Hedges' article.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Glenn Dubin, Bill Richardson, former New Mexico governor, Larry Summers, Steven Pinker, Prince Andrew, who gave a very eloquent and lack of sweat interview a little while back. Alan Dershowitz, of course, and then Les Wexner.
Les Wexner. There it is. That's the guy.
Who is another huge player in this, arguably even more prominent of a player than Epstein was.
Well, he was like the financier.
Yeah,
kind of.
Wexner sold the New York mansion to Epstein for $1, it's reported. And this is where one of the several locations where underage women were taken and groomed and abused, where just horrendous sexual violence was carried out. And what underlies all this is compromise. If you want to talk about real compromise, forget all the Trump Russiagate nonsense. It's right here. This was Epstein and Maxwell's job was to collect compromise on individuals like this, CIA style. And if you'll recall that when they raided, I forget if it was Epstein's island house or if it was his New Mexico ranch. Um, and there you go. Interesting. He had a ranch in New Mexico. Bill Richardson, former governor of New Mexico. They did find a safe that they sawed open, which contained videotapes, which contained DVDs, other um, material, which that cache has mysteriously disappeared, hasn't even been entered into evidence in the trial. There are a bunch of prominent victims who were not called to testify in the trial. So again, it seems the fix is in here. What that uh, says about the fate of Ghislaine Maxwell, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know
Maybe,
yet, but they're going to
maybe
protect themselves. That's what they,
right.
it's very similar to the Assange case. There is no actual justice. There is no, it's just whatever the I hate like the establishment or whatever, the ruling class, whatever you want to call them. I don't care. But they want to just maintain their power and control. And so and they've completely co-opted the entire system, the legal system, everything. So they're never, it's like when the cops investigate themselves. This is you're never going to see. That's why Julian Assange is being tortured, but George W. Bush is going on Ellen. You know what that's the system is corrupt to its core. I mean,
Yeah. And one more thing I want to point out here with the Maxwell trial, phenomenal mysticism again pointed this out, is pointing this out in the chat. I heard Twitter banned an account that was trying to track the important details of Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, and that is true. That is Maxwell Trial Tracker, I believe.
I don't know what
But
it is now. They've had to come back a couple different times,
right.
but
But what's interesting about that, and Addy Ads revealed this in a recent interview he did with Franco on Frank Analysis. He revealed that that account previously was covering the Rittenhouse trial
yeah,
and basically transferred that Rittenhouse account and all of its followers, both on Twitter and on Substack, over to the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, and seems to have just been repeating what reporters on the ground have been
mm-hmm.
reporting. Both Addy Ads and I believe Kristen T. Harris have said that nobody who's associated with that account, as far as they can tell, is on the ground. So that's not to say that the account is controlled opposition, but it is something to
You
be
should be
wary
mindful of
of.
the fact that that's possible, though.
Right, absolutely,
Everybody,
especially when you're dealing with CIA elements,
yeah,
and then as well, it's worth pointing out that the CIA has long been one of the largest sex trafficking cartels in the world, going back to almost its inception. Um, a story just came out at the beginning of this month about pedophilia within the CIA. They were having sex with children as young as 2 years old. In one case, a mother was forced to film the sexual acts. There is an article about that in the mainstream press. I believe it's a Newsweek piece. I don't have the link on hand, but you can find that if you do a quick search.
I'll see if I
Um,
can pull it up real quick so I can put it in the chat.
and for anybody who's not familiar with the Franklin scandal, definitely look into
Yes.
that, because that was sort of
Is it a BuzzFeed?
it might be a BuzzFeed piece. Yeah,
Okay. I
I
didn't
think
think it
you're right.
was, but okay. I got it.
Yeah, BuzzFeed occasionally does good
I know. No,
journalism.
I know. Strangely, yes. They used to be like listicles, but yeah, I'm gonna drop this in the chat for you guys if you want it.
Yeah, and
Oh,
so
balls.
it's also worth looking into the Franklin scandal.
Yes.
I'm forgetting his name, but he, this journalist, researcher, wrote a book on the Franklin scandal. It's pretty much like the comprehensive account of what happened. And I believe he recently spoke in New York at a Justice for the Victims rally. I might have been the same one that Hedges spoke at. So that will give you some historical context and really show you the through line here that it's not just drug trafficking that the CIA has been
No.
involved in.
Well,
It's
Assange also exposed the stuff that was going on in Afghanistan. There was an American contractor there that was I forget the name of the Bacha Bali or something like that. But they were essentially hiring young men, child prostitutes or whatever. But just basically sex trafficking done by a U.S. contractor that wasn't part of the WikiLeaks. This has been going on for a very long time. A lot of people who have been covering this, people like Whitney Webb, they've been labeled as conspiracy theorists. No, this has been going on for a very long time.
Yeah, and we did an interview a while back with Danny Scherzen, who served in Afghanistan, and he was actually invited by
to one of those events.
Right, not knowing what it was. He did not attend as soon as he found out what it was. But basically, what they do in those events, I think it's important for people to know because these are the crimes that the U.S. is committing willingly. What they do in those events is that tribal elders essentially will recruit young boys, dress them up as young girls, get them high out of their minds on hashish. The elders will get high on hashish as well, and then they will rape the young men. It's a very sick, psychopathic, I don't know what you call it, that goes on, and it's something that regularly happened in Afghanistan while the U.S. was there, and of course the U.S. did nothing about it. Which is not to say that there weren't people who were standing up against it and calling it out, but one voice against the imperial machine is not a fair fight. So anyway, a lot of what's happening in the Maxwell trial now tentacles out into a lot of different things that have been happening over a very long time in U.S.
This is far-reaching
intelligence and imperial history. So it's very much worth looking into. You will go down rabbit holes, but you will learn a lot. And knowledge
it's
is
not
power,
easy.
as
It's
it
not
goes.
an easy thing to educate yourself about. It is very dark. It is very dark. And I should highly recommend, it's not directly related, but it is an amazing documentary and it is potentially directly related. But Who Took Johnny? It's a really good documentary about Johnny Gosch, who was kidnapped, I believe in the 70s, I want to say. But yeah, you just have to watch it. It kind of ties in with the Franklin incident. So it is but it's just a really good documentary. And again, this stuff has been happening for a really long time. This is really since the inception of the CIA. This is how they get dirt on people so that they can then puppeteer them.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a story for another time, but there is a lot of evidence that Epstein and his cohorts were very invested in transhumanism, and both at his island compound and his New Mexico compound, there were supposedly rooms and bunkers where transhumanist experiments, for lack of a better word, were being carried out. There's plenty of information out there on this. If you look for it, you can find it.
I highly recommend Whitney Webb's work for sure.
Yeah, definitely check out Whitney Webb's work at
That's a good place
Hangout.
to start.
And you'll, at the very least, get a sense of how deep and how far back this goes. So just to wrap, and I'm sorry to have to go into another dark story that involves children, but if you can pull up that
Rutgers
link. Yeah.
Okay.
So I went to Rutgers University, which is the State University of New Jersey, as an undergrad. So as an alumnus, I periodically get emails from them about what's happening there. And I received this email last weekend about Rutgers expanding enrollment of participants for Pfizer COVID-19 pediatric vaccine clinical trial. So, Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, is one of the main hubs for Pfizer injection trials on children. So, if you scroll down a little bit, I'll read through this because it's brief, but it gives you an idea of what's going on there. So Rutgers, and here they boast about it, the only New Jersey site for the vaccine trial will enroll additional children ages 6 months to 4 years.
Holy fucking shit.
And keep in mind that these are children do not need this injection whatsoever. Never mind that it doesn't work, but even if it did, they don't need it because they have what's called innate immunity. So going on,
We should
Rutgers,
say, let's try it. We should say we are not doctors. We are not offering you medical advice. We are just offering our opinions about these news articles. How about that? Maybe we won't get taken down this time. We'll try
right,
it.
right. But in a sense, it is up to us to
Make our own medical decisions.
delve into this and criticize this information because
Yes.
nobody else is going to do it besides us. Certainly not the mainstream media. So Rutgers, a clinical trial site for the global Pfizer BioNTech research study to evaluate the efficacy of its COVID-19 vaccine in children, is looking for participants for a third clinical trial on children ages 6 months to 4 years. Quote, children can get sick from COVID-19 and can spread the virus to others even if they are asymptomatic, which is false. While most children experience mild or no symptoms, some children can get severely ill and could have long-term effects, unquote, said co-lead investigator Simon Lee, an associate professor of pediatrics at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. Quote, maximizing COVID-19 vaccination in all age groups is important to stop the global progression of the disease. Vaccination will also help us feel safer about our children resuming school and daily activities. So, very scientifically based there. The Pediatric Clinical Research Center at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School in New Brunswick, the only clinical trial site in New Jersey, well, good for them, is one of the several clinical trial sites for Pfizer BioNTech's pediatric study. Rutgers also conducted trials for Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, and it currently is a trial site for Pfizer BioNTech's research study evaluating the efficacy of its COVID-19 vaccine in children ages 5 to 11. Children who meet the eligibility requirements for this study will be randomly selected to receive 2 doses of the potential vaccine or a placebo 6 months after the second dose. Those who participate will be told whether they receive the vaccine or the placebo. So that's unblinding, which is very much skews the results of the trial in favor of the injection, and will be offered the vaccine at the time if they had not been vaccinated. Researchers will track whether those who were vaccinated have lower rates of infection with moderate to severe symptoms than those who were unvaccinated over 2 years. Pediatricians and parents who are interested in their children being considered for the vaccine clinical trial can click here. So if you just click on that link where it says click here, it will bring you to okay. So
Tremendous
thank you for
response.
your interest in the Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School pediatric vaccine studies. Due to tremendous response, the study has closed for new referrals. Thank you. So I do have a tweet out there from the form that did come up before this overwhelming response. And the form specifically, and you can find this in my Twitter timeline if you'd like to, it said that at that point they were looking only for children 2 years of age or younger. So this university, which is funded by the state, is conducting experiments on children with an experimental injection that they don't need and will almost certainly harm them both in the short and long term. It's disgusting. It's psychopathic, and the way they promote it as some kind of advancement in science and some kind of protection for humanity is just gross negligence of the highest order. But people should be aware of that. Um, People should know which institutions are involved in perpetrating this crime against humanity, and they should really get as full a picture of as possible of where and how this is going on and how it's being sold to parents as something that's beneficial for their children when it's all the science, all the respectable science points to the fact that it's not. So um, I
I mean, like, what is really troubling to me about this whole thing is that, and what's a huge red flag to me is that any dissent, any questioning, I keep saying this. Science is literally about questioning. It's about trying to prove itself wrong. Like science isn't a religion; it's a process. And you should always question science, always and forever. Science is. I love when people say the science is settled. No, no, no. Science is never settled. We should always be open to new information. And be able to revise opinions. And so when people tell me I can't question something and then tell me that it's because I don't trust the science, it's an immediate red flag for me. And then I'm just looking at this common sense wise, if you look at all of the instances where it's been very clear that all of these restrictions or whatever, it's incredibly arbitrary. Like for example, closing down like bars and restaurants after 10. Like, so what, COVID's a night owl? Like, is that what you're trying to say? Like, it somehow, I mean, all of these weird that make no sense. Another one that I like to mention all the time is the NFL game. I forget which team it was. I think it was the Eagles, but I could be wrong. But they like went out and played like a 3-hour, like full contact sport, right? An entire NFL game, spit flying, sweat flying, breathing on each other, talking shit. That was fine. But then when they were in the locker room, they were celebrating their win and they didn't have masks on. So they got fined for that. And that's
right.
ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And so, and when you see how the rules don't apply to people like Nancy Pelosi, who can go get her hair done, or you see how, you watch the Met Gala and the only people who are wearing masks are the servants, you know what I mean? Like all of these things added up. If you're just looking at this from a common sense perspective, the fact that they are trying to control the narrative so harshly, the fact that they're trying to make science this weird dogma bullshit, you know what I mean? Like all of these things should put up red flags for everybody. And the dude who you cannot trust these people. You cannot trust. They've proven time and time and time and time and time and time again. How many times does your government get to lie to you before your sense of skepticism kicks in? You should be able to question this 100%, and they should be more than willing to bend over backwards to prove to you that all of this stuff is on the up and up. That should be the relationship that we have with our government. That's not they're forcing these things upon you, and these all this mandate shit, and that's creepy. It's fucking creepy. Nobody should be okay with this. This is your drift towards authoritarianism. That's it. Your drift. There you go. I mean, having like vaccine passports where you have to show your papers to be able to, like, a woman was turned down. To be fair, I don't know if this was in the States. But anyway, regardless, a human being was turned down for her cancer appointment. Like she had like a cancer treatment appointment because she didn't have her vaccine passport. That's crazy.
And now we're seeing reports that hospitals, in particular in the UK, are putting even essential procedures for patients on hold because they're currently having a booster drive and they want to complete that booster drive before they, for example, perform a necessary elective surgery on somebody. So we're seeing how sick this is getting. And if you really want to find out how sick the people behind this agenda are, this book, Robert F. Kennedy's new book, The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health, is a wealth of information. It's a very dark, very disturbing book. And you very quickly find out that Anthony
He's a
Fauci.
scumbag of the highest order.
Yes, he
Just look at the things
is
that have come out
responsible.
recently.
He's
He tortured
responsible.
beagles.
Yeah, he experimented on children who were recruited from foster families in New
Hmm.
York, and forced them to take injections, substances that they didn't need. These were healthy children, but he wanted to see how it would affect their healthy biological systems. He ended up killing over 100 of them, and they ended up in tiny coffins in a mass grave in a cemetery in New York, which is
Yes, this dude
detailed
should
in
be
this
in
book.
prison, not making decisions for the health of all American citizens.
Right, and he pushed AZT, I believe the acronym is the
Yeah, I think so.
so-called AIDS drug, which very clear, which was well known before he sanctioned it for use, to be nothing but destructive, and it ended up killing probably millions of people who were diagnosed with both HIV and AIDS. And he's doing the same thing again with remdesivir, which is being used on uh, COVID cases, whether they actually have COVID or not in the US. So people are being drugged with remdesivir, intubated, and that's why we're seeing the death rate. And these deaths are going down as COVID deaths. And we're seeing the same thing in the UK with the use of midazolam. Um, so it's a very sick program agenda that is happening right now, and it's not about health,
No.
and it's essentially about centralized global control of our lives. Health is the key they're trying to use to get to that control. So we need to be aware of all of this, and push back against it. Um, and it really is the hill that we are going to die on if we have to, I think. Um, and just one more thing I wanted to point out before we wrap, because we've been hearing a lot about athletes who've been
Oh, you want me to
collapsing
pull that up too?
after receiving the injection. Well, just that ESPN piece, I can't say for sure that this is because of the injection, but it's interesting um,
Oh, yeah.
that this former Denver Broncos wide receiver, Demarius Thomas, 33, found dead in his home, police say. And what's interesting about this is that uh, Roswell, Georgia police said Thursday night that Thomas was found dead in his home. Preliminary reports, according to police, indicated Thomas's death might have resulted from a medical issue. And then if you go down 3 paragraphs below that, it says former teammates also noted Thursday night that Thomas might have been having seizures in recent months. So quite suspicious there. Obviously, we can't say for sure that it's because of the injection. As far as I know, it hasn't been. Uh,
Determined.
yeah, it hasn't been determined, but something to keep an eye on there. We're
Well, and
talking.
we are hearing about, especially in Europe, there's a lot of soccer players, football players, whatever, who have been kind of struggling, dropping like straight down on the pitch, like they're collapsing. This is something that's it's really, we're seeing a lot of it. We're seeing a lot of it. So yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, and Steph Fife in the chat, she points out that Fauci was behind remdesivir trials in Africa, in which 53% of the subjects, for lack of a better word,
That's like, yeah.
died. That is very true, and that was also while there were other drugs available, which had a much lower death rate. And she also says that TLAV, the Last American Vagabond, interviewed Dr. Artis recently, whose father was murdered by remdesivir, and I recommend everybody check out that interview. It's about 45, 50 minutes long, but very well worth watching. And artists very concisely documents that this is indeed the case. He provides the actual documents to prove it on screen. An excellent interview. So check that out on The Last American Vagabond. That will also give you more insight to
Ryan does great work, period.
Yeah, more insight into how deranged this this COVID 1984 madness is. So not to end on a
it's not like we've been super cheery this whole
dark
episode.
and dismal note, but it's important that we all know about what's being done and what's being peddled to us, because it's not in the interest of our health. It's in the interest of controlling us if it doesn't kill us first. So
yeah, and it's a consolidation of power, huge power grab. This is a huge power grab, a resources grab. I mean, we got Bill Gates owning like 50% of the farmland in this country. Nestle's buying up all the water. I mean, this is bad, you guys. It really is. And it's, you know, there's a lot of tentacles in different directions. It is kind of confusing to keep all the connections straight and who knows who and who's working with it. I mean, it is, this is not conspiratorial. This is what's really happening. And we definitely have to keep an eye on it and be honest about it.
Yep.
And call it out for as long as we can. So
because as you see, they're coming for our children now, and that is if you haven't drawn the line in the sand already,
I think a lot of, I've been very happy to see that a lot of people seem to be that's their line, that's it, like that's no, we're not doing that, we're not playing that game. So that's been good to see. I think that there's been like a pretty strong hopefully, though, I mean, they're still pumping propaganda out, so hopefully they won't be able to sway more and more people. We'll see. We'll definitely see how it's going to flush out. But
well, as Nick Hudson pointed out in our interview, which was summarily deleted from YouTube,
you can find it on Rockfin and Odyssey, fams, if you want to check it out.
He pointed out that nobody's converting from the side of standing against this injection regime to supporting it. All the conversions are going the other way, and people are waking up to the fact of the dangers and the just violence that's involved and being sold to us as health. So whether that means we're winning or not, I don't know, but we have to keep up that fight, because it really is an existential fight, as is Assange's fight. It's a fight for all of us who care about just humanity and the welfare of humanity.
And being able to fight against these are the worst among us, you guys. They're really bad, terrible people, and they have a whole lot of power and control. And if we don't wrench some of it back soon, I mean, we're already, I don't even know. We're already pretty far gone. So, but yeah, these are huge fights if we wish to mitigate any of the destruction that's coming our way, because destruction's coming our way. They're fucking us over from every angle. I mean, financially, they're taking away all of our resources, all of our rights, I mean, it's not good. It's not looking good. It's a lot to take in, but we need people to, figure it out and start fighting back. Like, we really need, I don't want to get preachy, but we really do need to get fucking loud. The only thing that stops what's happening to Julian Assange, or what's happening, period, is mass public pressure. We're going to have to come together. We're going to have to come together and stand up and fight back against what's happening to us. It doesn't have to be like this. It really doesn't, you guys. It doesn't have to be like this. If we come together and we fight back, we can change the way that we do things. We don't, like I said, we don't have to have an economy of death and destruction and war. That's not like that's not written in stone. We can do better. We absolutely can do better. We just have to want it. We just have to be willing to go fight for it, because they're not going to just hand it over. You can't appeal to their better angels. Like, you can't beg them to do the right thing. It doesn't serve them their own selfish agendas to do those things. So you literally have to make them. I mean, at the very least, you need to be naming and shaming them. Like Kit Clarenberg tweeted that out today. You need to be naming and shaming them. Call these people
Absolutely.
out. You have to call them out. They're not your friends. They're not going to do it because you beg them and, you know, send them super sweet lovey-dovey tweets, you know, will you please speak up for Julian Assange? Fuck that. You need to go all in on these bastards. We need to make them uncomfortable. We need to make them know that this is an unacceptable position to take, that silence is not an option. And they're being nice is not cutting it. It's not working. I don't know why I have to explain that to grown-ass adults. It's very clear that that's not going to work. And again, Julian is dying. I'm not willing to like sit back and wait and be nice to the people who are, you know, have the power to be able to make a difference in that fact. So again, I don't mean to get preachy, but I am. And I just want to say thank you guys who are watching for letting me be a little ranty today, because I was all over the place a bit, but I am like, it's just been a weird and fucked up week really. But today especially has been, you know, kind of brutal. So like just being able to talk it out. And tonight I have the Free Assange Vigil. So we're going on at 9 and there will be more ranting, I'm sure, and we'll unpack this more and try to figure out that, you know, who's and what's and possibilities and you know, try to make sense of nonsense. So that starts at 9 if you guys want to pop through on that tonight. So yeah, I think we're good.
So yeah, we'll wrap there. Thank you to everybody in the chat. Very encouraging.
We love you.
Yeah, lots of good conversation happening there. Lots of good information being exchanged. And you know,
Plus, I just love you guys. Miss Tree, hi Miss Tree.
You're
Hi,
just
Dead
as much a
Buddha.
part of this as we are, and we're glad to have you in the fight with us. So
yes,
we will see you next week at 4 p.m.
Oh, we should hype the fact that we have Piers Robinson coming on Tuesday at noon Eastern.
Yep.
We're gonna do kind of like just like a basic what is propaganda? How is it used? Like just like a really like down to the bones of it. And then we're going to kind of try to examine how propaganda is used against us. We may pull up some examples and kind of try to dissect them, just do like a really broad strokes, you know, how to identify propaganda, how to recognize it, that kind of stuff. Because I think sometimes just going back to basics is good and just kind of refocusing your brain on what you need to be looking out for. Because they're really good. They have a really effective propaganda game. So I'm super excited to have Piers on. Again, that's noon on Tuesday. And then, of course, like Jesse said, we will be back on Friday next week at 4 o'clock. Weekly show, Facts on Friday. So just come through, hang out in the chat. And we love you guys so very much. And we'll see you on Tuesday, I guess. So
Peace.
bye, guys.